When did you teach a toxic person a lesson they'll never forget? 2 weeks after my wife and I got engaged, I found her awake at 3 a.m. picking her cuticles until they bled. She was stimming hard, while her phone kept buzzing with increasingly angry messages from her mother. Answer me now! You're being ungrateful. This is why you need supervision. I put the comfort exercises I'd been secretly learning to use, and when Lara was calm and asleep, I called her mother to ask what was going on. I told Lara she's not allowed to invite her dad's side of the family. My jaw dropped. And who are you to make that call? I'm paying for the wedding. What I say goes. I decided to give her a reality check. Listen here. Her dad was the one who raised her. You went gold digging while married and left them both. Peanut butter sandwiches have had a bigger role in Lara's life than you have. I heard her go silent. My money, my rules. Then the line went dead. The next morning, her lawyer husband called me. He broke down mine and Lara's finances to me like I was a second grader who couldn't do math, telling me his wife was the only way we'll have a wedding. We'll just elope then, I retorted. That's when he threatened me. I have a signed affidavit stating Lara as incompetent. One filing, I'll have your marriage invalidated, and you investigated for taking advantage of a disabled woman. He hung up before I could respond. 3 days later, me and Lara met them at a restaurant hoping to reason, but instead, it made everything even worse. Her mom started by trying to order for Lara without asking what she wanted, and I had to interrupt her to get the meal Lara actually liked. Here's what you don't understand, the mom said, as soon as the waiter walked away. Her dad was a violent alcoholic. I did what I did for safety. That's a lie, Lara shyly interrupted. Is it? Her mom raised her voice knowing it would make Lara too scared to speak up again. Then her husband took out a folder. There's actually something else we needed to talk to you about tonight, he said with a smirk that made me angry by itself. Wouldn't you agree that Lara struggles to make her own decisions? Her mom started. I told her that I think my wife is an amazing, strong, and perfectly capable woman. Lara beamed with joy at that comment, but her mom just rolled her eyes. My wife and I have done some thinking, the husband said, and we realized that it's best for everyone if from now, my wife has the legal authority to make all of Lara's medical and financial decisions for her. I looked at him confused. What are you even talking about? But then he opened the folder and took out a document. He slid it across the table and my jaw dropped. It was a conservatorship document, prompting me to legally sign my wife's life over to her mother. Sign it, he said. I stared at him in disbelief, wondering if he really thought we would just hand over my wife's autonomy. I'm not signing, I said sternly. The husband sighed. Then we'll just file this ourselves with additional documentation about Lara's incidents. My mind almost short-circuited. What incidents? Lara never had any incidents. Her mom pulled out another folder, this one full of documented evidence showing Lara's self-hurting episodes. Lara hitting herself, stimming out. It sickened me seeing the love of my life's gift being turned into ammunition. Lara was trying to stay composed, but failing. Why are you doing this to us? She cried out. Because honey, her mom tried to take Lara's hand, which she pulled away. I know what's best for you. Lara started silently crying. Here's our offer, the husband said while I wiped Lara's tears. Sign the document. Let my wife take charge, and I promise you'll have the most beautiful wedding. He then leaned back, smirking. If not, we'll go to court. And even if I somehow lose, you'll pay $100,000 in legal fees minimum. I'll file motion after motion. I'll depose every teacher, doctor, and therapist she ever had. I'll make your lives hell. Seeing Lara's mom smugly offer to pour me water, right as this was said, made me snap. I pulled out my phone and started dialing on the speaker. Lara's mom asked what I was doing. Hi, State Bar Association. I need to report an attorney threatening to file a fraudulent conservatorship petition. He's extorting us using fabricated evidence. The husband went white. End that call. Now, but I didn't. I started giving them all the information, causing him to lose his cool. You little... He lunged for my phone. A few diners turned at that moment. Don't touch him. Lara spoke up. I could tell she was confident now. She then turned to her mom. You called me names. You said Dad's genes made me broken. You told my grandma to die faster so you wouldn't have to see her at the wedding. The mom stood up, panicking, now trying to defend herself to the onlookers who'd heard Lara speaking. She's having an episode. Someone help. She's violent when she's like this. Call security. I'm not having an episode, Lara said calmly. You stole my disability benefits for vacations. You told me if I took my life, at least you'll get a payout. A man at another table spoke up when that was said. That sounds like extortion, he told Lara's mom. I'm a paralegal. This is multiple felonies. She screamed at him to mind his business. Ma'am, a woman called out. I'm a social worker. Did you just claim she's violent? Because she seems pretty calm to me. You're the one screaming. The State Bar was still on speaker. They called out the husband's name, and pressing the speaker against his ear was one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. When the conversation was done, his hands were shaking. He tugged at his wife's skirt. I'm sorry, honey. She grabbed her purse and stormed out with him following behind like a kick dog. The whole restaurant was staring at us now. Lara was shaking so bad she could barely stand up. I helped her to her feet and we walked out without paying the check. Nobody stopped us. The drive home was dead silent, except for Lara rubbing her hands together over and over. I kept one hand on the wheel and reached over to squeeze her shoulder with the other. She leaned into my touch but didn't say anything. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket, but I ignored it. When we got home, Lara went straight to the couch and pulled her knees up to her chest. I sat down next to her and pulled out my phone to see 12 missed calls from her mother's number. We both agreed right then that we weren't answering any more calls from her. Everything had to be in writing from now on. I blocked her mother's number on both our phones, but kept the lawyer husband's unblocked in case we needed it for legal stuff. Lara nodded when I showed her what I was doing. She looked so tired. After she went to take a shower, I grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything that had just happened. Then I asked Lara to help me make a timeline of every threat her mother had ever made. She pulled out her laptop and started going through old bank statements. Every few minutes, she'd point at the screen and show me another withdrawal that happened when her mother visited. There were thousands of dollars missing. We saved everything to 3 different backup drives and uploaded copies to the cloud too. By the time we finished, it was getting dark outside. We looked at our wedding savings account together and realized we had to cancel all the vendor deposits right away. Lara's eyes got watery when she saw the venue booking we'd been so excited about. I wrapped my arms around her and promised we'd still get married, even if it wasn't the big party we'd planned. She nodded against my chest, but I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt. That night, neither of us slept much. The next morning, I woke up early and started typing a formal complaint to the State Bar about what the lawyer husband had done. My fingers were steady on the keyboard as I wrote out every single threat he'd made. I described how he'd tried to force us to sign over Lara's rights. I explained about the fake evidence they'd created. I printed 3 copies and drove to the post office to send 1 certified mail. Then I emailed another copy and saved the confirmation. When I got back home, Lara was at the kitchen table with her laptop open to a legal website. We spent the whole morning reading about conservatorship laws in our state. Lara took notes in different colored pens like she always does when she's really focusing. She highlighted the parts about what courts need to prove someone can't make their own decisions. The bar was way higher than her mother had said. You needed real medical proof, not just some made-up papers. After lunch, I started calling disability rights lawyers. The first one said he was too busy. The second one was named Constance Rivers, and she got it right away. Her assistant said Constance had dealt with parents trying to use disability against their kids before. She could see us tomorrow at 2. The third lawyer I called said the same thing Constance did about this being serious. The next day, we drove to Constance's office downtown. She had certificates all over her walls and a big desk covered in files. She listened to our whole story without interrupting once. Then she laid out exactly what we needed to do. First, we had to document absolutely everything. Second, Lara needed to get a capacity evaluation from a doctor who wasn't connected to her mother. Third, we couldn't have any contact with her mother at all. She explained that the fake evidence actually helped us because it showed her mother was lying on purpose. Lara asked really good questions about her rights and what would happen in court. Constance looked impressed and said Lara was clearly capable of understanding complex legal stuff. That made Lara smile for the first time in days. When we got home that evening, we set up a shared folder online for all our evidence. I took the financial records and Lara said she'd email her doctors for her medical files. So her mom's been taking Lara's disability money for trips while telling her own daughter she's broken. That's quite a thing to admit in front of strangers at a restaurant. We sat at the kitchen table working side by side for hours. Every few minutes, one of us would find something new to add. Lara started telling me about things from when she was a kid that I'd never heard before. Her mother used to call her broken all the time. She'd threatened to put Lara in an institution if she didn't do what she was told. There were emails going back years where her mother wrote that Lara was too defective to make any choices for herself. I took screenshots of every single message. Some of them made me so mad, I had to get up and walk around the apartment to calm down. Lara showed me one where her mother said she wished Lara had never been born. Another one said her mother would get money from the state if Lara was declared incompetent. We saved everything in multiple places and made sure we had backups of the backups. The next morning, my phone started going crazy with email notifications from her mother. She was sending the same folder of incidents over and over, but each time with new stuff added. I opened one and saw she'd written dates for things that never happened. She claimed Lara had a meltdown at a grocery store last Tuesday when we'd been home all day. Another one said Lara hit herself at a doctor's office we'd never been to. Lara saw the emails on my phone and started picking at her fingers again. Her breathing got fast and I could see her starting to rock back and forth. I forwarded everything to Constance without typing a single word back to her mother. We spent the whole next morning going through every single one of Lara's online accounts. Her banking app had her mother listed as a backup contact. Her email had her mother's phone number for account recovery. Even her Netflix had her mother as a profile manager somehow. Lara sat at the kitchen table with her laptop changing every password to something completely new. She removed her mother's access from everything one by one. I watched her delete her mother's phone number from her medical portal. She changed her security questions to things her mother would never know. It took us 4 hours to get through everything. That night, we decided we needed a break from all the legal stuff. I ordered Chinese food from the place down the street, and we put on that comedy show Lara loves with the guy who does the funny voices. She actually laughed when he did the impression of the angry customer. It was the first time I'd heard her really laugh in days. We ate orange chicken straight from the containers and went to bed at 9:30. The next morning, someone knocked on our door so hard it woke us both up. It was 7 in the morning, and this guy in a polo shirt was standing there with a manila envelope. He asked if I was me, and when I said yes, he handed me the papers and walked away. I opened them right there in the doorway. It was an emergency conservatorship petition filed by her mother. The hearing was set for next week. Lara read over my shoulder, and her face went white when she saw what her mother wrote. The petition said Lara was getting worse every day without supervision. It said she couldn't take care of herself and was in immediate danger. Constance got the papers from us within an hour and started working on our response. She filed an opposition to the emergency request and asked the court for more time to gather evidence. She included statements from the people who saw what happened at the restaurant. The witnesses wrote about how calm Lara was and how her mother was the one screaming. The court clerk told Constance we'd know in 48 hours if they give us more time. I made an appointment with Catherine Ray, who Constance said was the best psychologist for these evaluations. She specialized in testing adults with autism to see if they could make their own decisions. The soonest she could see us was in 3 days, but she promised to write her report fast because of the court deadline. That evening, Lara sat at the kitchen table writing down all the ways she takes care of herself. She wrote about paying her bills on time and cooking her own meals and managing her medication. She filled 3 pages with examples of decisions she makes every day. Her mother sent another email, but this time to everyone in the family. She told them I was keeping Lara prisoner and stealing her money. She said I wouldn't let Lara see her family and that I was dangerous. Lara's cousins started forwarding us the email, asking if everything was okay. One cousin called and said she knew it was lies but wanted to check on us. Lara typed out a simple email explaining what was really happening. Her hands shook while she typed, but she got through it. She told them about the conservatorship attempt and the threats and the restaurant incident. We decided to make a video of Lara explaining things in her own words. I set up my phone on the kitchen counter, and Lara sat at the table. She looked right at the camera and started talking about why she wanted to make her own choices. She explained how she manages her life and what boundaries she was setting with her mother. The first take was a little shaky, but the second one was perfect. She spoke clearly about her rights and her capabilities. She only needed those 2 takes and got more confident with every word she said. Constance filed all our declarations with the court the next day. She challenged every piece of evidence as edited videos of normal stimming behavior. She included pages of information about autism and how stimming helps people self-soothe. The filing was thick with witness statements and expert opinions and educational materials. She showed how the videos were cut to make normal behavior look concerning. 2 days later, we heard knocking at the door again. This time it was 2 police officers saying they got a call about a welfare check. They said a concerned relative reported that Lara might be in danger. Lara stood in the doorway and calmly explained the harassment we were dealing with. She told them about the conservatorship case and the false reports. I showed them Constance's business card and her phone number. They looked at each other and one of them shook his head. They said Lara seemed fine to them and they'd noted in their report. Before they left, they warned us we might get more calls like this. The next morning, I drove to the police station with our folder of evidence, while Lara stayed home to avoid more stress. The desk sergeant looked tired when I explained we needed to file a notice about ongoing harassment through false welfare checks. He pulled out a form and started typing, while I showed him screenshots of her mother's texts, threatening to call authorities if we didn't comply with her demands. He nodded and said, documenting this pattern would help if they kept getting calls. I watched him stamp the report and add it to our case file. He suggested we keep records of any future calls with dates and times. I thanked him and grabbed an extra copy of the report for our growing evidence binder. Back home, I found Lara organizing all our documents into color-coded folders. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from the state bar with their official letterhead visible through the window. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. They acknowledged my complaint against the lawyer husband and scheduled an intake interview with investigator Fern Randolph for next week. The letter requested all supporting documentation within 14 days. That evening, I sat at our dining table surrounded by printed emails and transcribed recordings. I arranged everything chronologically, starting with the restaurant confrontation recording. Each piece of evidence got numbered and labeled. Lara helped by creating an index listing what each document proved. We worked until midnight getting everything ready. The next morning, my email pinged with an unexpected message. The social worker from the restaurant had tracked down my contact info through mutual connections. She wrote that she'd been thinking about what she witnessed and wanted to help. Her email included a detailed professional statement describing Lara's calm demeanor during the confrontation. She noted specific observations about Lara's clear communication and appropriate responses to stress. She emphasized that in her 20 years of experience, she saw no signs of incapacity or need for conservatorship. I forwarded it immediately to Constance, who replied within minutes saying this was exactly the kind of third-party evidence judges loved. That afternoon, Lara pulled 3 years of her disability benefit statements from the filing cabinet. We spread them across the living room floor and started marking withdrawal patterns with highlighters. Every few months, large amounts disappeared from her account. I grabbed Lara's mother's Facebook and started comparing dates. A withdrawal of $800 matched a spa weekend post. Another $1,500 matched a cruise photo album. We kept finding matches until the theft total reached $32,000. Lara's face went pale as we added up the numbers. I took photos of everything laid out with the social media posts next to the statements. The next step required filling out a report with the Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General. The online form took hours to complete with all the details they wanted. We had to list every suspicious transaction with dates and amounts. I uploaded scanned copies of the statements and screenshots of the matching social media posts. The system assigned us case number OIG-2024-3847 for tracking. A week passed before I discovered something that made my blood boil. I'd called Lara's psychiatrist to schedule her regular appointment, and the receptionist asked if her mother would be attending as the designated caregiver. I explained her mother had no authority and asked why they thought she did. The receptionist said her mother had called last month claiming to be updating emergency contact information. Her mom's playing dirty tricks with fake welfare checks while they're building a paper trail that would make a lawyer cry tears of joy. $32,000 in stolen disability money matched to Facebook vacation photos is detective work that writes itself. We spent the entire next day driving to every doctor's office Lara had visited in the past 5 years. At each one, we filled out new forms explicitly removing her mother's access and adding me as the emergency contact. Several nurses seemed relieved when we clarified the situation. One mentioned her mother had been calling asking for detailed medical information. Another said she'd been trying to change Lara's prescriptions without Lara knowing. We got written confirmation from each office that her mother's access was revoked. That evening, Lara decided to call her grandmother Prudence, who lived 2 states away. I sat beside her, holding her hand while she dialed. Prudence answered on the 3rd ring, sounding surprised to hear from us. Lara explained everything that had been happening with the conservatorship attempt. I could hear Prudence gasp through the phone. She said she'd wondered why her daughter had been telling family members that Lara was getting worse. Prudence admitted she was scared of her daughter's temper, but wanted to help. She promised to write down everything she'd witnessed over the years, including the financial exploitation she'd suspected. She said she'd mail it to Constance directly to avoid her daughter finding out. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from the lawyer husband's firm. The envelope felt heavy with implied threats. Inside was a formal litigation hold notice, demanding we preserve all evidence related to what he called our defamation campaign. The letter contained barely veiled threats about consequences for spreading false information about his wife. He demanded we stop contacting third parties about the matter. I drove straight to Constance's office with the letter. She read it and actually laughed. She said it showed consciousness of guilt and desperation. She dictated a response letter while I watched, citing legal precedents about witness tampering and intimidation. She sent it certified mail with return receipt requested. The following week arrived with Catherine's evaluation appointment. The building smelled like coffee and cleaning products when we walked in. Catherine greeted Lara warmly and led her to a quiet room while I waited in the lobby. I tried reading a magazine about home improvement, but kept reading the same paragraph about kitchen tiles over and over. Through the door I could hear muffled voices but not specific words. After 90 minutes that felt like hours, the door opened. Lara looked tired but confident. In the parking lot afterward, the stress hit her all at once. Her breathing got fast and shallow. Her hands started shaking. She used the grounding techniques we'd practiced, looking around and naming 5 red cars in the lot. Then 4 sounds including the traffic and birds, 3 textures she could touch on her jacket, 2 scents from the nearby restaurant, 1 taste from the mint she kept in her pocket. Within 10 minutes, she was calm enough to smile. She said she wanted ice cream before going home. We stopped at the shop downtown, and she got chocolate chip cookie dough and a waffle cone. That evening, we sat at our kitchen table with index cards and pens spread everywhere. Lara wrote out simple sentences she could say if police showed up, or if someone questioned her ability to make choices. "I am safe here," went on one card. "This is my choice," on another. "Please call my lawyer Constance," on a third. She practiced reading them out loud over and over until her voice stopped shaking. I watched her lips move as she memorized each word. She taped the cards to our bathroom mirror and read them every morning while brushing her teeth. 3 days later, we drove back to see Catherine for the second meeting. This time, Catherine asked Lara about relationships and what consent meant to her. Lara explained how she understood boundaries and why she chose to be with me. She talked about respect and trust and even cracked a joke about how I always ask before eating her leftover Chinese food. Catherine actually laughed at that one and wrote something positive in her notes. The next morning, we spent 4 hours at different doctor offices and clinics, removing Lara's mom from all the medical forms. Each place had different rules and most required Lara to show up in person. At the third clinic, the woman behind the desk looked at the paperwork and then at Lara. She leaned forward and whispered something about being proud of her for taking control. Lara smiled bigger than I'd seen in weeks. We had to drive across town to the main hospital because their system needed special approval approval. The security guard made us wait while they called 3 different departments. Finally, a manager came down with more forms. Lara's hand cramped from signing her name so many times, but she kept going. 2 days passed quietly until my phone rang at work. My manager called me into his office looking confused and worried. He said someone claiming to be a lawyer called saying I was taking advantage of a disabled woman and stealing her money. I explained everything and gave him Constance's number. He scheduled an HR meeting for the next day and told me not to worry, but his face said different. The HR meeting went better than I expected. The head of HR listened to my whole story and took notes about the harassment. She made copies of the threatening emails and voicemails we'd been getting. My manager offered to write a character reference if we needed it for court. They approved flexible scheduling for any court dates and said my job was safe no matter what happened. That night, we spread our bank statements across the bed and faced the ugly truth. The lawyer bills were eating through our savings faster than we planned. We canceled Netflix and the meal delivery service, put the wedding venue deposit on hold, stopped buying coffee on the way to work. Lara pulled out a jewelry box from her closet and dumped it on the bed. She picked up a diamond necklace her mom gave her for her birthday and said she'd rather have freedom than fancy rocks. We listed everything online that night. Meanwhile, Constance was calling every teacher and therapist Lara ever had. Most didn't want to get involved and hung up quickly, but 2 of her old teachers sent letters about how smart and capable Lara was. One mentioned how Lara tutored other kids in math during lunch. Another wrote about how Lara organized the whole school fundraiser by herself senior year. Constance said these would help our case. The emergency hearing finally came, and we sat in the courtroom holding hands under the table. The judge read through all the papers while we waited. After 20 minutes, he looked up and said he was denying the emergency conservatorship request. But then he scheduled another hearing for 3 weeks later to look at more evidence. Constance warned us outside the courthouse that Lara's mom would probably do something crazy now. She was right. That afternoon, we sat in our car outside the courthouse and talked about our wedding. We decided to just go to the courthouse with 2 witnesses once all this ended. Lara said she didn't want her mom's shadow ruining our special day. We could have a party later when we felt ready. Maybe invite the people who actually cared about us. The next morning, Lara's phone started blowing up with messages from cousins and old friends. Her mom had posted on Facebook about her mentally ill daughter being manipulated by a predator. Some cousins sent supportive messages saying they knew her mom was lying. Others asked confused questions about what was really happening. Lara spent an hour writing one public response explaining the truth. She posted it and then blocked her mom on everything. We blocked her on Instagram and Twitter too, even LinkedIn just to be safe. I helped Lara change all her passwords and set up 2-factor authentication on everything. Her hands were shaking, but she said it felt good to cut her mom off completely. We ordered pizza that night and watched old movies trying to pretend things were normal. 3 days later, we sat in a therapist's office with beige walls and a white noise machine humming in the corner. The therapist had us do breathing exercises first, then asked us to describe what we were feeling without using the word fine. Lara picked at her jeans and talked about feeling like she was drowning in paperwork and phone calls. I admitted I was checking my phone every 5 minutes expecting more threats. The therapist showed us how to recognize when we were spiraling by tracking our physical symptoms like tight shoulders or shallow breathing. She gave us a worksheet with grounding techniques and made us practice them right there in the office. Lara started crying halfway through when she said she felt guilty for causing all this trouble. I took her hand and told her none of this was her fault, that her mom was the one creating problems. The therapist had us schedule weekly sessions and gave us homework to check in with each other twice a day about our stress levels. 2 weeks passed with more therapy sessions and legal meetings before Catherine's evaluation report finally arrived at Constance's office. The report was 40 pages long with detailed observations and test results showing Lara had full capacity to make her own decisions. It explained how her sensory needs were accommodations, not incapacities, and listed all the ways she successfully managed her daily life. Constance read parts out loud to us, smiling bigger with each page. She said it was the best capacity evaluation she'd ever seen in 20 years of practice. The report specifically addressed and demolished every claim Lara's mother had made about her being unable to care for herself. Catherine had even included research studies about autism and decision-making capacity to support her conclusions. We made copies for our files, and Constance immediately sent it to opposing counsel with a cover letter, suggesting they drop the case. Catherine's 40-page report seems awfully thorough for just 2 meetings. I wonder if she's dealt with similar conservatorship cases before. The timing of that workplace harassment call right after the court hearing feels too perfect to be random coincidence. The next morning, I had my state bar interview with Fern Randolph over video call from Constance's conference room. Randolph asked detailed questions about the restaurant incident for almost 2 hours, taking notes the whole time. She wanted exact quotes from the husband's threats and asked me to describe his tone and body language. I showed her the conservatorship documents they'd tried to make us sign and explained how they'd threatened us with financial ruin through endless litigation. Randolph mentioned they were considering criminal referral for extortion based on what I was describing. She couldn't give me any timeline, but assured me the investigation was treated as high priority given the severity of the allegations. 3 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived from her mother's lawyer containing discovery materials. Inside were USB drives and printed screenshots that made my stomach turn. They'd included secret recordings of Lara stimming during family dinners from years ago, edited to remove context and make normal, self-soothing look concerning. There were videos of her rocking back and forth during stressful conversations, flapping her hands when excited about something, all presented like evidence of incompetence. Lara watched 5 seconds of one video before breaking down completely, saying she felt violated that they'd been recording her without permission. I held her while she cried, and we called Constance immediately. Constance worked through the weekend drafting a motion to exclude all the recordings from evidence. Her brief argued they were obtained illegally without consent in private settings where Lara had reasonable expectation of privacy. She cited case law about prejudicial evidence and wrote pages about how the videos were edited to misrepresent normal autistic behaviors. The motion was 25 pages of controlled fury, systematically destroying the legal basis for using the recordings. She filed it first thing Monday morning and hand-delivered copies to make sure there were no delays. Her mother's lawyer filed an opposition claiming the recordings were necessary to show Lara's condition, but Constance's reply brief tore their arguments apart. 2 days after that, Lara's phone rang with a call from her grandmother Prudence. When she answered, it was actually her mother's voice on the recording, saying Prudence wanted nothing to do with Lara anymore. Then her mother's actual voice came on, threatening to make sure Prudence never spoke to Lara again if she didn't drop the case immediately. immediately. Lara cried for an hour after hearing her grandmother being used as leverage against her. We talked about it over dinner, going back and forth about what to do. Lara finally decided her boundaries were worth maintaining, even if it meant losing her relationship with Prudence. She said giving in now would just mean more manipulation forever. Her mother's lawyer then tried to subpoena every therapy record Lara had from the past decade, filing demands with dozens of providers. Constance fought each subpoena individually, filing protective orders and motions to quash. She negotiated with opposing counsel to limit the scope to only recent relevant time periods and made sure privileged communications stayed protected. The back and forth took 2 full weeks of constant legal filings and phone calls. Finally, the evidentiary hearing date arrived, and we walked into the courthouse at 8 in the morning. Her mother's lawyer spent 3 hours painting Lara as someone in decline who couldn't manage basic tasks. They played the edited videos on a big screen, showing Lara stimming without any context about what was happening. They presented fabricated incident reports claiming Lara had meltdowns in public that never actually happened. Lara squeezed my hand so hard during their presentation that my fingers went numb, but she stayed completely composed. People in the gallery were taking notes and whispering to each other about what they were seeing. After lunch, Catherine took the stand as our expert witness. She explained in clear terms how autism affects sensory processing, but doesn't impact decision-making ability. She went through current research showing that autistic adults are fully capable of managing their own lives with appropriate accommodations. When the opposing expert tried to use outdated theories about autism, Catherine calmly dismantled each point with peer-reviewed studies. Several people in the gallery were nodding along as she explained how stimming was self-regulation, not distress. She pointed out specific moments in the videos where Lara was actually happy and excited, not having a crisis like the other side claimed. The judge asked several questions and seemed genuinely interested in learning about autism. When it was Lara's turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her shoulders back and head high. She spoke clearly about her daily routines, explaining how she managed her budget with spreadsheets and automated payments. She described her work accomplishments and the accommodations that helped her succeed. When asked about her stimming, she explained it was like other people tapping their foot or clicking a pen, just her way of regulating sensory input. The judge listened carefully and asked follow-up questions that showed he was really trying to understand. When he finished asking questions, the judge leaned back in his chair and started flipping through the stack of papers in front of him. His face got more serious with each page he turned. He looked up at Lara's mom and her husband, then back at the papers, then at them again. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall behind us. The judge set the papers down and folded his hands together on his desk. He told Lara's mom that what he saw in these documents was deeply troubling. He said the evidence showed a clear pattern of using disability laws as a weapon against her own daughter. The judge's voice got louder when he talked about the financial exploitation and emotional abuse documented in our evidence. He pointed at the stack of bank statements showing the stolen disability benefits. Then he held up the recordings we'd submitted as evidence. Lara's mom tried to interrupt, but the judge raised his hand to stop her. He said his decision was final, and there would be absolutely no conservatorship granted. Not now, not ever. The judge told her she should be ashamed of trying to control her adult daughter this way. Her lawyer husband started gathering his papers quickly while the judge was still talking. The bailiff moved closer to our table as the judge dismissed the case. We stood up, and Constance put her hand on my shoulder while we walked toward the exit. Outside the courthouse doors, Lara's mom was already screaming at the top of her lungs. She kept yelling that we'd destroyed her family and ruined everything she'd worked for. Her husband grabbed her arm trying to pull her toward their car, but she jerked away from him. Then she turned and started running straight at Lara with her hands out like claws. I stepped in front of Lara while 2 security guards rushed over from the courthouse entrance. They grabbed her mom's arms before she could reach us and held her back while she kept screaming. Constance knew about a side exit from her years working at the courthouse and led us quickly through a different door. We could still hear the screaming as we got in our car and drove away. A week passed before we heard anything else about the case. I was at work when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Fern Randolph from the State Bar calling about the complaint I'd filed at the restaurant. She said they were moving forward with formal charges against the lawyer husband for his threats and attempted extortion. The investigation would take several months, but she wanted us to know it had officially started. She said he'd have to answer for everything he'd done and could face serious consequences for his actions. 2 days after that call, we got a thick envelope from a law firm we'd never heard of. Inside was a letter from the lawyer husband's own attorney with what they called an attempt at reconciliation. The letter used a lot of fancy legal words, but basically said nothing real. He wasn't admitting to doing anything wrong or taking any responsibility for what happened. The letter just said he hoped we could all move forward and put this behind us. I showed it to Constance, who read it and shook her head. She said silence was usually the best answer to these kinds of non-apologies. We threw the letter in the trash without responding. The next Tuesday afternoon, Lara and I went to the courthouse for something much happier. She wore a simple blue dress she'd picked out herself and couldn't stop smiling. My best friend came as one witness, and Constance came as the other. The ceremony took less than 10 minutes, but it was perfect. The judge who married us recognized us from the conservatorship hearing and said she was happy to see us there for this reason. After we signed the papers, we went out for ice cream to celebrate. At work the following week, my boss called me into her office for my performance review. The review noted that I'd seemed distracted lately, and my numbers were down a bit from last quarter. I accepted the improvement plan she offered without arguing, because I knew the past few months had affected my focus. After the official part was over, she closed the door and told me privately that she admired how I'd handled everything. She said she'd been following what happened through office gossip and thought I did the right thing. With Constance's help, we filed paperwork for a harassment restraining order against both Lara's mom and her husband. The judge granted it based on the courthouse incident and all the threatening messages we'd documented. It wasn't as strong as we'd hoped, but it meant they couldn't contact us anymore without facing legal consequences. Their lawyer's reconciliation letter reads like someone trying to apologize for a car accident while still insisting the other driver jumped in front of them. Fancy words can't dress up that mess. We changed our phone numbers that same week and finally felt some peace. 3 months after all this happened, Lara and I were sitting in our therapist's office for our weekly session. We'd been going every week to work through everything that had happened. Lara still felt sad about losing her relationship with her mom, even though she knew it was toxic. The therapist helped us set boundaries and stick to them no matter what. We were slowly building our life together one day at a time. Lara was getting more confident about making her own choices and speaking up for herself. We started planning a small celebration for next spring alone with just our chosen family, the people who actually cared about us. Thanks for being here with me through all those twists and turns. It's been quite the journey to wonder about together. Take care and see you next time. Subscribe for more content like this.